This video is brought to you by PrizePicks. Hey, what's up, and welcome to QnA, the show where I take your questions and answer them here in video format. A ton of questions to get into, so let's just jump into it. The first one comes from Terex, who says, I feel like I've heard a lot of excitement about Boston and Bond, but I haven't heard anything about Concepcion. Is he not looking good so far? I think Concepcion's look fine for what they've asked him to do. He's made a couple of nice snags downfield, but keep in mind, what the Browns are going to do with Casey Concepcion is not stuff that's going to pop in camp, right? Part of the reason you're seeing a lot of Bond in Boston is because, one, they're playing well, but two, what you ask Bond in Boston to do is stuff that you can see in 7-on-7s and in non-padded practices, right? Because you're not asking Isaiah Bond to go out there and break a ton of tackles. You're not asking Isaiah Bond to go out there and make people miss. And the same thing is true with Denzel Boston. You're asking those guys to go downfield and get open, and in Denzel Boston's case, get some 50-50 balls. So they play a style that you're going to notice their impact more at this part of the calendar than somebody like Casey Concepcion, right? The ironic part is that during the season, guys like Bond and Boston, who are going to be downfield, sometimes can like disappear, not because they're not playing well, but because the Browns can't get the ball downfield for whatever reason. So like their impact doesn't feel as important during the season sometimes as it feels when you're seeing them get to showcase what they can do when they get the opportunity because of the way practice is set up. But somebody like Casey Concepcion, he's somebody you're going to want to see in the preseason. He's somebody you're going to want to see in joint practices. He's somebody you're going to want to see in padded practices, because what he can do really well is not stuff that's really going to be that's going to show itself a ton in the spring part of the calendar, right? Casey Concepcion's best trait is that he's good at football. And right now they're not playing football. They're playing 7-on-7. They're practicing football. Casey Concepcion, he gets some punt returns in the preseason. He gets some he gets the ball in space. He gets to make people miss. You'll start to understand the pick, right? It's kind of like he's a running back almost, where it's like, I wouldn't care about if you're not hearing much about a running back in the spring. It really doesn't matter, right? I think right now you're hearing about Boston and Bond because of their skill set, but let's see what Concepcion looks like once we get to training camp, once we get to the preseason, and see if they're going to talk about him then, because I think that's going to be the case. They have a lot of plans for him, right? Downey Too Fresh says this: we are not in a position to draft a quarterback. Oh, if we are not in a position to draft a quarterback, do you think we might go for a free agent, assuming none of the QBs on the roster show enough? Also, could that lead to us bringing back Baker Mayfield? Well, you, sir, your question just made the thumbnail, because that is absolutely what I'm putting on the thumbnail. Baker Mayfield return possible. But yeah, I think it's something that you should consider. I think the Browns, and I think Andrew Berry said this in a press conference before, the Browns view their draft picks as assets. And they don't just view those assets as the only way you can use them is to like draft a player with a draft asset. They think that you can use trades and all that, that all factors in. So if the Browns think that they can't solve their quarterback problem in the draft, but they might be able to solve it with a trade, they'll do that. If the Browns think that they can solve their quarterback problem in free agency, they'll do that, right? Now, would they bring back Baker? I don't know who specifically Baker had bad blood with in the Browns organization. That's really the question. There's obviously bad blood between Baker and Kevin Stefanski. Baker made that very known once Kevin took the job in Atlanta. But I don't know if there's bad blood between Andrew Berry and Baker Mayfield. I would have to imagine there is, right? Part of Baker's beef with the Cleveland Browns is that nobody called him or something after a trade, and that would typically be Andrew Berry's responsibility. So, I don't know if there's like an appetite for Baker Mayfield to come back, and I don't know if there's an appetite for Andrew Berry to bring him back. It's possible that Andrew Berry hated Baker Mayfield the most. I wouldn't be surprised if that were the case, right? Like, look at how Andrew gets down and ask yourself if the guys that Andrew gives orange dots to, that's the Browns' designation of high character. If the guys that the Browns give orange dots to remind you anything of Baker Mayfield. You know what I mean? Like, it typically no. So yeah, I don't know if that'll happen. I think that would be the most hilarious result that we could get if we got a Baker Mayfield reunion before Baker Mayfield played the Cleveland Browns in Cleveland. But it's possible, right? It doesn't seem like Tampa Bay is going to be throwing the kind of money at him that he wanted in the offseason. They're not talking about an extension right now. He could hit free agency. Or at least be available in some way, shape, or form. And the Browns aren't in a situation where they could ignore Baker Mayfield being available, right? If they, like last year, I made the argument that they're not in a situation to be able to ignore that Kyler Murray's available. If they can't ignore Kyler Murray, they definitely can't ignore Baker Mayfield. So yeah, they would have to pay attention to that. You know what I mean? Michael says this, hey Q, just in general football question. If you have the first overall pick in a draft, and you don't need a quarterback, do you take Jeremiah Smith, or do you trade the picks for a haul knowing he might not be available the next time you pick? I'm going to be honest, this is a hard question to answer without like having more context about what's available in that draft, right? Because let's say if there's a Jeremiah Smith, right, he's number one wide receiver, but in that same class, there's somebody at the same position that's like slightly below him, then yeah, I would trade back and just get the other guy, get the assets to make up the difference. So, you know, I don't know enough about this class yet. Nobody does to really make a decision on that. What I will say is that Jeremiah Smith, he has superstar potential. And if you can't have a quarterback, you do want a superstar. And the Browns don't have a superstar level player. They got a lot of guys I think can be a star level player, really good guys, all pro level guys. Don't get me wrong here. Like Carson Schwarzenegger, it could probably be a all pro caliber linebacker, but like superstar caliber, we're talking about walk-in Hall of Fame. You get on a video game cover because you play linebacker type shit. Like we talking about Ray Lewis, right? When we talking about superstar level linebackers, we're talking like I don't even know if Fred Warner qualifies, even though he's the best linebacker in football. Like this is a superstar is just beyond like what normal really good is, or even normal elite is. That's what I think Jeremiah Smith has the potential to be, right? The Randy Moss of this generation. You know what I mean? That kind of guy can make a lot of things happen for you, especially if he's on the offensive side of the ball. So, yeah, I would find Jeremiah Smith very intriguing if the Browns can't get a quarterback. The next question comes from CLB, who says this. Hey, what's up, Q? If Jerry Jeudy is looking rough throughout the first 4 to 5 weeks, the rest of the wide receiver room is cooking, do you think there could be a market to trade him for a possible cornerback depth or other assets? If something is available, sure, but I don't anticipate there being much of a market for Jerry Jeudy that's going to be worthwhile if he's not playing well. We'll start with more questions, but first I got to thank my sponsor, PrizePicks. PrizePicks is a fun way to earn cash while you watch your favorite teams. No complex betting rules, just pick more or less on a few player stats and lock in your lineup. Here are my picks for this upcoming season, AFC North edition. Jimmy Bernard, I have less than 475. This has to do with volume available in Pittsburgh's offense. Quincy Judkins, I have over 975. Browns improved line. I think the run game is going to be better with it. Chase Brown, under 900 yards. Joe Burrow equals less rushing yards usually for the Bengals offense. Mark Andrews, more than 475 yards. Lamar's going to need a safety blanket. Check to see if PrizePicks is available in your state. You could follow me on the app at Quinn_C to see all my lineups. Download the PrizePicks app today. Play $5 and get $50 in lineup to download the app using the link in the description. All right, sad with the next question. Says this, hey Q, if our defense drops from top 5 with Myles to a top 10 defense without him, hopefully we don't drop more than this, I don't know. And the same time, our offense improves from bottom of the league to maybe 25th. Can we reasonably expect, what can we reasonably expect, and where does that leave our team relative to last year? I really don't know, right? Because the Browns defense last year I thought was top 3, right? I thought it was one of the best defenses in the NFL, capable of carrying a mediocre offense. But the Browns weren't a mediocre offense. They were an abysmal offense last year, right? So if we had a top 3 defense and the 25th ranked offense, I think you can take that to the playoffs. I've seen that get to the playoffs before, right? But a top 10 defense and a top 25 offense, it just doesn't feel like enough to make the playoffs, right? Like, if you're going to make the playoffs without a quarterback, you need to be elite, top of the league at one side of the ball, right? Offense or defense. Obviously, without a quarterback, it's going to have to be defense. And the real question is, like, can the Browns be more than a top 10 defense without Myles Garrett? That's going to be the big question. Like, what happens to the upside and what happens to the floor of this defense without Myles Garrett? Because he was the best defensive player in football, and not having that guy makes a big difference. I know some people try to convince me that it's not going to be that big of a deal. It's going to be a big deal. Myles Garrett, really good at football. And that's not to say that Jared Verse isn't. It's just Myles is on a whole different level of football player than almost every other defender in the league. So taking him out, if it drops you from a top 3 defense to just a top 10 defense, I don't know if that's good enough to carry an offense. I don't know if that's big enough to give you enough margin of error to deal with the offense that still is sub-average, right? Which 25th would be sub-average. So I would think that that would probably result in 6 to 7 wins, maybe. I think in order to get over 500, you need to have one of the best defenses in the NFL. You can't just have a good defense. I think you need a great defense. And I think that's the struggle that this team's going to have without Myles Garrett, which is the defense is still going to be fine. They're not going to be awful. It's going to be a good defense. But is it going to be a defense good enough to carry you if you're struggling offensively? And being the 25th offense is much better than what we've been, but it's still struggling offensively. It's still a team that if the score gets above 25 points, we have no shot of winning. So, you know, I do think that probably cuts you off from a little bit of high-end potential there, not having Myles Garrett on this team. And I'll wait to see them on the field before I talk about what their floor could be, but I do worry that the floor could be significantly lower than maybe we're anticipating or hoping. But still think they'll be a pretty good defense. I think top 10 is about right. I think top 8 is more where they'll sit. But I do think to carry an offense that's not going to be above average, you need to be a top 3 defense. And I don't know if we're going to be able to get back to top 3 without Myles Garrett. But that's the big question. The next question comes from Shocker Radio, who says this. Q, where would you equate Jared Verse in the hierarchy of the current pass rushers? Would you put him at an Aiden Hutchinson level, higher or lower? You previously mentioned he could grow into a Max Crosby type, but that seems a little uncertain to me. What do you think? Why do you think that? All right, so Aiden Hutchinson level, absolutely not. I would... Like, if the Browns got Aiden Hutchinson back for Myles Garrett, I'd have been thrilled, right? There were 2 players that if the Browns could have got back from Myles Garrett, I would have been legitimately happy that we traded Myles Garrett. Aiden Hutchinson and Will Anderson. Those are the 2 players, right? Those players have the potential to be the best edges of their generation. So... don't really think Verse is in that level. I don't think he's near Aiden Hutchinson. I don't think he's near Will Anderson. I think he's in that tier of pass rusher that you would put like a Josh Hines Allen. Could become Daniil Hunter, you know. Nick Benito, I think, is in his range when it comes to edge rushers, right? Like, he's in that class. So there are the guys who are like destined to be all pros, and then the guys who can work their way into a all-pro selection, right? But not really Aiden Hutchinson, my bad. We have Aiden Huntington. Not Aiden Hutchinson, not Will Anderson, not Micah Parsons, but, you know, Daniil Hunter. I think that's where he could get to. Josh Hines Allen is where he could get to. He needs to develop a little bit more to his game. Like his speed to power is pretty good. I think he needs a solid counter off of that. And I think he needs to be in a system. I think him being in a system where he can get more production, like the Browns, will help Jared Verse get to that level. But I also think that there needs to be a level of cerebralness to his game that's not there right now. He's not a very cerebral player when you watch him. He's very much, I do this one thing good, I'm going to throw this one punch, and I'm going to overpower guys with that punch. And it works for Jared Verse enough of the time. But, you know, it kind of reminds me of like the beginning of Myles' career where Myles had to learn how to be a cerebral player. And Jared's not really at that point yet where he's cerebral about his approach. You know, it's very much brute force when you watch Jared Verse. It's not really built up to a cerebral level there. And like with somebody like Aiden Hutchinson, you can see the cerebralness to his game already on top of the incredible talent, right? The bend and everything else that Aiden Hutchinson has. Will Anderson, right? You talk about like just Swiss Army knife of skill set that's greater than what I think that Verse provides, but also there's that cerebralness to his game here, right? Verse, I don't think he has the same kind of tool set as those guys. Still a pretty strong one, but, you know, one that can get him to Max Crosby level, one that can get him to Danielle Hunter level, one that's more akin to Nick Bonito, right? Not necessarily Aiden Hutchinson, Will Anderson, which, again, the Browns would have got those two guys back or one of those guys back in a first-round pick. I mean, like, I would have, Andrew Berry would be the best GM in the world if he could do that. Like, you would expect, like, Aiden Hutchinson, like, a third back. You know what I mean? But, yeah, that's kind of where I sit with his potential. I don't know if that's higher or lower than where you had him, but that's where I am with him. Elijah says this: if Sanders turns out to be decent and puts up about 3,200 yards, 20 touchdowns, and 9 interceptions around how Bryce Young played last year, do you think they still trade up high to try to get somebody like J.J. Colin Simmons or just sit and pick on the board because the draft class is still loaded in the back end? I wouldn't rule out that the Browns, even if Shedeur had a decent season, would still draft a quarterback because, like, they might be into, like, Lenore Sellers. And Lenore Sellers isn't somebody that you would play right away. So if Sanders can hold it down until his contract expires, his rookie contract expires, which would be 2 seasons after you would draft Lenore's, then that would give you time to develop, right? And I think that's something the Browns would be interested in. So I expect the Browns' interest in quarterback to be there regardless of what happens this season almost. Like, outside of, like, the Browns winning the Super Bowl this year, I think that they're probably going to be interested in a quarterback for the future at some point in this offseason. Dog Pound Pod says this: hey, Q, what should your expectations be of Alex Wright and Isaiah McGuire? I think they're both underrated and have big seasons. What's your take? I think they'll definitely have more production because there'll be more opportunities there. I'm excited to see both of these guys in this opportunity to get more. I don't really have a ton of expectations for them because, again, the way I'm looking at the defensive line now is as one big unit, right? My expectations for that unit are that they should be able to get around the same sack number that they had last year. I don't know if that's going to equal the same impact that they had last year, but sacks, they should be similar to that. How they get it, I think it's going to be by a lot of committee, and we'll see who cleans up and gets the most statistically. But, you know, I think that they're just going to, I think we're going to have to look at this as a group, right? A group project to be able to make up for what they lost there. Cleve Ray says this: hey, Q, do you think Verse is capable of putting up similar production when Myles was hurt in 22 from the car accident? He was only at 60 to 70%. If so, do you believe the defense is capable of still being top 5 in the league, even if a new defensive coordinator, or does an injured Myles still better than Jared Verse when we have in terms of defensive team takes a step back? So Myles Garrett in 2022, after the car accident, had 16 sacks, was a second-team All-Pro, 5th in Defensive Player of the Year. So if that's 60 to 70% of Myles, as you're stating, I don't know if that's what Jared Verse is going to be this year. Like, Myles in that one season had more sack production than Jared Verse has in his entire career right now, right? Like, it would be a leap for Jared Verse to get to that production. I think that Jared Verse is probably going to be around 12 sacks. That's why I think a fair bar is to set for him, right? He has 12 career sacks. If he gets to 12 sacks this year, I think that'd be a nice number for him. A second-team all-pro level player, you know, that's a tough ask, right? If you look at the best edges in football right now, there's not a lot of room in that conversation to really get in. I don't know if that's where we should have our I don't know if that's even fair to expect of Jared Verse. Because, again, we're talking about 60, 70% of Myles Garrett. That still was good enough to break the Browns single-season sack record. And that's 16 sacks. And that's an all-pro. And that's somebody who got Defensive Player of the Year votes. And right now, Jared Verse is a good player, but he's never even been close to that level of defender, right? He's never been close to getting Defensive Player of the Year votes. He's not been close to really making an all-pro team in his career, and he's not gotten close to 16 sacks. You can argue with me about this, but these are not debatable. It's just facts about where Jared Verse has been in his career so far to what Myles did in 2022. So I don't think we could get to that level with him, and I think that's part of why I think the defense probably takes a step back from being top 2, top 3, to probably being closer to, you know, top 8. Again, it's not terrible, but there is a question of if that's good enough to carry a team, which, you know, the Browns offense, even if they improve and get to like 25th, and even if the Browns offense is good, or even if the Browns offense makes an improvement and they get to 25th, you know, you're still going to need a defense to carry you, because 25th is not like setting the world on fire in offense. Colin says this: hey, Q, do you think the Browns made a mistake by not going after a veteran quarterback earlier in the offseason? I feel like none of these QBs are really starter worthy, and we'll probably have to try them all out, considering we started every QB on the roster for like the past 3 seasons, and vets can at least anchor us with competent play. Well, I don't know if there was a vet out there that you could have gotten that would anchor you with competent play, if I'm being honest. And to be real with you, the Browns' plan for quarterback has nothing to do with what they feel like the potential of the play can be right now. It's about being cost effective. Shedeur Sanders is here because he's cheap. You know, Dylan Gabriel is here because he's cheap. Taylor Green is here because he's cheap. The Browns have clearly prioritized cheap, young, cost-controlled players at the quarterback position to offset the deficit that they have right now with not Myles Garrett, but Deshaun Watson, right? That is what they're dealing with and why it is that the quarterback room is structured the way it is. So, no, I don't think they consider it a mistake. I think they didn't go after a veteran quarterback because they don't want to spend extra money at a quarterback position that they don't really think has the potential to be very good this year. So they rather just put young players in, let that be what it is, and then take the swing at quarterback when the time is to take a swing at quarterback. That's it for Q&A, though. Thank you guys for asking the questions. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.